see faces in many places. Traces, anarchists, racists, nationalists, wasted. Yeah, I see they're white, black, and Asian. In recent times, a collection of just so much raging. Was it being in lockdown or lockdown for hundreds of years? The suppression, the institution and division, leading the oppressed into far too many tears and fears. Now we got white guilt, white privilege. Perhaps now we taste the subtle disadvantage. A frown, pulled over, followed some suspicion, simply stemming from failing to have a relation. News reports, social media, and a black tile. Man, I only see it lasting for a short while. Black Lives Matter, ACAB protests and statues fallen. Racism still exists. When can we unite as one to answer their calling? Don't be offended. This is our chance to empathise, listen and learn. Episode 4 isn't virtue signaling. We're making this our concern. Yes, racism usually takes place in a small form, but it's the 21st century. It's about time we walk through the storm. Ice-T saw it, rapped about it hard and clear back in his day. That's 30 years ago. His words are still true. Freedom of speech, just watch what you say. We've got to get better, to forget the different amounts of melanin. From time to time, it's good to pause and listen in. Let's stick together, remember history, keep believing that the human race stops the hate and keeps on reconciling. So in the end, all said and done, we can live together in love, simply win and be one. It's time to enlighten the shadows.
Hey up guys, it's Rory from Enlighten the Shadows once again. Today is episode 4. This one is an international one we've got coming up. It's not a UK guest. This guy that I've had today, he's from all the way the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. I'm really excited. This is going to be something slightly different. I think it's something that's completely relevant right now and is absolutely crucial for the world to move forward as one and united. So yeah, I just thought it's due credit to men and their mental health and their understanding of one another, that we may not have the exact same experiences, but this is important today that we just listen in and take as much as we can from it so that we can have that one love for one another. So yeah, last week we had episode 3. It's been absolutely popping off in terms of the views. I just want to say to my subscribers and followers, thank you so much. Thank you on Facebook. You're sharing the granny out of it. I'm absolutely loving it. It's just really reaching men. And I know for a fact I've even had, I'm not saying any names, but I've had people come forward confessing that they've had these struggles about gambling and other things in their life. And it makes me feel it's worthwhile that Enlighten the Shadows is happening for a reason, but not only for a reason, but helping people to get where they're at and meet their needs and just help them and aid them and be brotherly in their love for one another. So yeah, thank you so much. That was last week, as you can see on your screen, Scott Harlow, and that was the mental health impact from COVID-19's lockdown. It was absolutely inspirational stuff. But anyway, moving on, I just want to say welcome to my guest. This is my brother from another mother. He's my mate from uni. I don't get to speak to him much, but thank God for social media. I know a lot of people are not feeling it right now, and it's an intense time. But this guy popped up and wanted to know contextually what was going on with a post that helped me learn and improve myself and humbling me as a man. But yeah, he just popped up and we started dialoguing on inbox, and it was just so enjoyable to get to the learning experiences. So this guy's a former basketball player for Wingate University, so we're repping the Bulldogs today as well. where I used to go to uni and play men's soccer. So any of those Bulldogs out there watching, thank you so much. Stay with us the whole journey. This is going to be class today. Shouldn't be any more than an hour. So yeah, Chase, welcome, brother. How you doing?
Roy, thank you for having me. I'm doing great.
That's great, man. So all I want to start with today is, like I do with a lot of my guests, I'll either usually go to the start of their adulthood, mate, but because we really need context, and I feel like it's important what's going on in the world right now, as I've said, it's important to know where you've come from and the journey you've personally gone on, the experiences you've had. So I believe that you grew up in the state of Maryland, as the Americans call Maryland, so which is just south of Washington, D.C., I think, or right around there. So yeah, man, the floor is yours. Just, I want to hear about your experiences growing up, what family dimensions look like, all these community styles. So yeah, man, let's go for it.
Yeah. So Maryland is, it's interesting. Maryland is, it borders Pennsylvania to the north, Virginia to the south, and in between Maryland and Virginia is D.C. So D.C. isn't a state or a capital, but it isn't a state, but it's the capital of the United States, obviously. So my county that I grew up in is Prince George's County, and it borders Washington, D.C. Is one of two suburbs that border the nation's capital. So a lot of people who work in D.C., they either live in Maryland or they live in Virginia, or they may live in D.C. So it's a huge, I like to call it, I don't like to use the word melting pot, but it's a fruit salad. We don't, they don't necessarily melt into each other, but, we all coexist in the same bowl.
Got you.
So I grew up there. Both my parents, they are federal government workers. So they work for the federal government, different agencies. They've bounced around, and I'm the middle child. So
like me, bro.
all the middle children out there.
Struggle's real, bro. Struggle's real.
Yeah, exactly. We have that. We may have that middle child syndrome where we need to be heard and seen, and so I would say I have a little bit of that. I definitely am pretty outspoken about things that I feel are important. But the middle child, my older brother, all of us are a family of athletes. So my older brother played football at Georgetown University. He's now an officer he's a police officer at the United States Supreme Court.
Sorry, just to ask you, is that American football, like the
touchdown? American football. Sorry,
we're gonna have people from both sides of the pond, brother. So we've got to be clear.
Sorry about that. Yeah. American football, and then my younger brother, he played American football at Penn State University.
Can you give people the idea of how big scale that is and the people that they gather, the matches and that?
I mean, Georgetown is more of an academic institution. There's still Division I football, so you have Division I, Division II, Division III. But Georgetown is on a smaller scale. Now, Penn State, that's big time college football, 100,000 fans. In the stadium holds 100,000 people. Penn State actually played a game a couple years back in Dublin, Ireland, against University of Central Florida. So I'm sure some people saw the game or were able to tune in, and that's how they became familiar with Penn State. There's other reasons to be familiar with Penn State, but we don't want to. We'll rather leave that to researchers out there. But yeah, so we were very competitive. Prince George's County is a unique place. It's just to give you a little background, Washington D.C. at one point was the nickname Chocolate City because it was a majority minority or Black city. The most people that lived there were African American.
Really? So what time period are we talking about? What decade?
That was about the 40s, into the 60s, into the 60s and 70s.
Because just to say to you, in that period as well, Chase, particularly around the Second World War, when we had US troops coming in the United Kingdom, they were shocked about the way in how they were treated, just equally and with respect, and no one really cared that they were like African American or anything, but they weren't white basically. So yeah,
Right.
it's interesting, man.
Yeah. So, it was a majority Black city, and that was pretty rare in America at the time, and maybe still is, that a major city, let alone the nation's capital, would be a predominantly African American city. So fast forward throughout time, the 1970s, 1980s, you have Reaganomics, you have Nixon, and the war on drugs. That's when crack cocaine became prevalent in cities across the nation. And it really hit the African American community hard. Now, one could say, how does cocaine necessarily get into the hood, or where these people don't have enough money to go travel to get these drugs? Obviously nowadays it's not that hard to get drugs. You can find them any and everywhere. But
yeah, man, coke's everywhere in the UK right now.
Yeah,
it's like the drug. Yeah, sadly.
Right. So that's neither here nor there. So as the now fast forward, a lot of how PG County became to be a predominantly minority county. The public schools, you have 56% are African American, 36% are Latino in the public schools. So how that became was the federal government pays pretty well. It's a secure job. Not only till recently with the politicized government shutdown did working in the federal government become a higher risk, or a not as secure job as it was before. So it pays pretty well. A lot of those African Americans in DC, they wanted the nice home with the grass to raise a family, so they moved to the suburbs. All right. So that's where I grew up, around mostly Black people or minorities.
Got you.
All right. So that's shaping to when I get to Wingate, which maybe you could guess or couldn't have guessed that, because how I was there, I seemed really comfortable around people, many different people. I didn't have a problem interacting with people who didn't look like me or came from different backgrounds like me.
Yeah, man. I remember you and Jamie and then many others, the older lot before you, in the basketball team and even the American football team, who are just different to me as well, in that sense, that diversity. And this is more about you, but counterculturally, I grew up in a county, it's a state called Lincolnshire, and there was like one BAME pupil in my whole year group. The rest were like white. Like Lincolnshire's like 99% white. So my exposure of meeting you and some of the fellas was, some of the most diverse encounters I've ever had in my life. And thankfully, somehow or gracefully, I didn't care. I just loved you all and got on with it. So, yeah, man.
Yeah. As a youth, I did all the I was I would say middle class. I wasn't like hurting for wondering where my next meal was going to come, but we weren't necessarily rich. There were times where we couldn't pay we had only cold water because we just couldn't afford to have hot water for the month, or the power might get cut off for a couple days and then to pay it. So I'm not going to portray that I was like piss poor or coming up out of the quote unquote American dream story. My parents worked hard, and they really just sacrificed a lot, because my mom didn't obtain a college degree and it was an associate's until I was 11 years old. My dad never graduated college. He attended college for 2 years and then dropped out.
Sounds like they did really well, but to get where they went in terms of working the federal government, done really well.
Yeah. They just happened to be present at the right time. It was a blessing for them to, just time was on their side, and the hiring of the and the expansion of the federal government just happened to be during that time. So yeah, I mean, basketball was huge. I mean, I had a childhood, but really my childhood centered around basketball and academics. I had grandparents who were really involved in my upbringing. So, that is something that I look back on when I look at other adolescents, that, why I turned out this way and why they may have a left turn or a bad turn. And I really had a structure, I really had, when I got home from school, my grandparents were there. They wouldn't let me watch TV while I do my homework.
They were on it, bro. They were on it.
Yeah, I couldn't go outside unless I did my homework. So, they deserve a lot of that credit, because, other people who look like me, they may not have a grandparent to make sure they do that. Or their mom may get off of work, at 7:00 at night, and they haven't did their homework because nobody's policing them to do their homework. They may not have ate after being in school all day. The last time they ate was at 12:00 noon. So, these are like the subtle things that kind of shape a kid's trajectory and progression through life that we kind of don't think about. We kind of take for granted. Or if I don't know if anybody listens to Meek Mill in the UK, but he says, if your mom's at work and she's a single mother, or let's say a single dad out there, and he has to work, and the kid is 5 years old or 6 years old, or let's say he's in middle school and he gets home from school, who's going to cook him food? Who's going to make sure he do his homework? And then we talk about that trauma that kids, we talked about a little bit before we came on here, but that trauma that kids deal with daily, whether it be maybe their dad's not around, maybe he's wondering why his dad doesn't want to be around. Maybe does his dad love him? And he has to deal with that going to school. And he sees other kids his age, their dad picks them up from school or come to the games, and that's eating inside, and that's causing him to act out in certain kind of ways.
Yeah, man.
So that's the indirect effect of the absentee parents or the broken households that run rapid in African American communities. And you can say, the war on drugs took a lot of that out of it. Whether the parents were actively doing drugs, or they just happened to be prejudiced or looked upon as a person who may do drugs because of the color of their skin.
And so just to be clear for our viewers, would you say that is a definitive, particularly in the States in that time, and even potentially today? Because there was a footballer, soccer player that is, his name's Andre Gray. He's played at high level, like top league, and he's African British, and he said that, and this is more like stereotype, as you say, not direct racism, but it's a unnecessary stereotypical form, and could be directly related to it. But he said, I'm either a rapper, a footballer, or a drug dealer, and that's what he said this week. So it's like,
I mean, the history of propaganda and stereotypes, particularly negative stereotypes to African Americans, have been put on since the beginning of this country, beginning of slavery even, we were dangerous, or more susceptible to commit crime, or because slaves worked in the fields, their definition in their body, their physique was a certain way. But in reality, athletics just became an avenue where, that was the way of a kid bringing his family from out of welfare or a poor situation and making it better. And I mean, you see it. I mean, I say that's why football players around the world, not American football, but soccer, we say here in the U.S., around the world, that is the people's sport. Whereas here in the U.S., soccer is a middle to upper middle class sport. It's for the people who it's for the haves and not the have-nots.
Oh yeah.
So that's why, you know, that hunger, that grit, that football players around the globe approach the game with, it's not the same for somebody who's trying to play this game so they can feed their family.
Got you, bro.
Yeah, makes sense. So
yeah, man.
But the propaganda has been from the beginning, and it is still going on. I mean, you can say, I mean, you know, whatever your opinion is about this president that we have now, to out in a public forum with the stage that he has to say that Mexican are rapists. I mean, that is to box people in. Sometimes that sticks, whoever it sticks with, whether it's, you know, that is the propaganda similar to what
yeah, man. It's like these harsh, like direct blanket statements about a certain people group. And it's almost like this identity politics, or what should I say, more like grouping and this postmodern view where we're trying to like just put people into these groups. And I personally think it's quite dangerous. And, you know, you just mentioned current US President Trump about what he said about Mexicans. And it's like, in the same way, there's many of them, isn't there? And some of them are seen as quite like unharmful, playful, like the film with Wesley Snipes, White Men Can't Jump. You know,
White Men Can't Jump. Exactly. It's like, and I think, you know, me per se, I'm a very independent thinker. You know, I would say whatever I say and the experiences that I share on your show are not to say that a Black person experiences the same way. It's not a generalized thing. We're all unique in our own way, and I think that should be what is taken away. That, you know, what's good for one Black person may not be good for another Black person, or the thought process of one African American is not the thought process of all African Americans.
Got you. Well, I want to. It's like we're jumping ahead. I'm loving it. We're like getting into. It's great because we're going to history. We're talking about, you know, social psychology and all this stuff. It's really important for the way we frame our opinions, the way that we have ignorance or knowledge, and it's very crucial. But yeah. I'm trying to hook us back into, like, do you know at Wingate in North Carolina, like, and you got to that point where your basketball and your academics, as you said, like, what were your interactions like coming to Wingate? Would you say, because you've mentioned your upbringing, it's quite middle class, right around the capital, actually, you know, 50-60% African American, 30% Hispanic, and the rest white, essentially, and so I want to ask you, like, what was Wingate University like? Going to college, as you call it, university, as Brits call it. What was it like? Your diversity and exposure and experience and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, you know, like my parents valued education, obviously. So I was in schools, even though they were public schools, they were programs that were going to challenge me academically. So, but that also meant that usually my classrooms, what they look like, they were pretty diverse. My best friend from kindergarten, I have two best friends from kindergarten that I still talk to this day, one Black, one white. We just grew up together. You know, so from an early age, I had a very close friend that didn't look like me. So I think that helped me in a sense, because that allowed me to, when I got to Wingate, that allowed me to, you know, it wasn't a thing of like, you know, you can't trust white people just because of history, context, you know, and I'm like, you know, I've been backstabbed by a Black person and a white person, so you can't really tell who's going to backstab you. Whoever's going to backstab you, they're going to do it, you know. So when I fast forward, I was in classes in my classrooms were very diverse growing up, elementary, middle, and high school, from Indian to African, and I mean like these
True,
are all
yeah.
first generation children. But when I got to Wingate, that was the first time where, you know, my peers weren't first generation, so they weren't Americanized in a sense. They were like what we call in my community, or just me growing up, my lingo is like they were straight off the boat.
Got you, yeah.
All right. So, you know, you had the English boys, you had other Europeans like Steve and Gags, who are Ireland, right?
Yeah, Northern Ireland, yeah.
Irish. And you had Junior from Cameroon, and you had the Brazilians. You had there was like a in this one little small town with one or two stoplights, one shopping center, a McDonald's. Like,
this is true.
And I'm like, I mean, I'm from a metropolitan area, so you move a metropolitan kid into the boonies of North Carolina, like, and boonies just is like in the deep, like it's, you know, you don't really know what to expect. I mean, I loved the campus when I visited. I didn't meet a soul, but you know, I came down in March and it was sunny. People were out by the pool, and I was like, oh yeah, this is the place. So, yeah, I mean, Wingate was great for me. I just made the most of it. You know, I challenged myself to get out of my comfort zone. And I think a lot of people are scared to do that. People are scared to get out of their comfort zone, and for whatever reason they may be, but we call it, at the institution that I work at, we call it being open to grow.
I like that. Would you say, sorry, because I'm loving what you're saying, and it reminds me of something, like, because we're obviously talking about diversity and current issues, and we're going to go deeper, but like, I would say like tribalistic behavior in terms of, like, we have these biases and they're subconscious. I wouldn't say they're directly like, oh, you're being racist, but like naturally black people hang out with black people, white people hang out with white people. And then in the United Kingdom, Asian, as in Indian, Pakistani, they really like hang around their own. And that's not anything wrong. I'm just saying, like, we have that natural tendency, don't we? But from what you're saying, and then our both experience at Wingate, it's like this tiny small town in North Carolina in the south of North America. And it was like this crock pot. It's almost like the fruit salad, as you said.
Yeah. It was, you know, it was quite a social experiment almost. Like, you know, you put all these different people from every corner of the globe, put them in a small town, and where it's not like we had many options of socializing outside of the university. So we had no choice. I felt like we had no choice. Either we were going to hate our experience or be that loner campus of only 2,000 people, or you were going to get to know people and really kind of expose yourself, become vulnerable a little bit. And you know, I don't know, you know, what my reputation was around the gate, but you know, I felt like I really made a connection, not only with everyone there, but, you know, I felt like I made everlasting friends where, you know, where one coming from my same situation, it would be probably very difficult for them, just because, like what you said, tribal tendencies. Me coming from a minority county, well, my tendency would be to hang, and I generally hang around mostly African Americans here.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, but I'll still drag them along to the quote unquote house DJ.
Yeah, house music. Yeah.
You know, yeah, I'll take them there because, you know, I was exposed to it. I enjoy it, and I try to like broaden their horizon.
Mm.
But you know, that's the thing of getting out of your comfort zone. Some of them like, nah, for what? You know, and it's like, I mean, it's just fun. It's just a fun, good time, a good vibe. And
yeah, man. And I feel like this is what the world needs to do more, brother. I feel like, you know, when I went to, you know, Wingate, I knew of the top hip hop and rap artists, but oh man, something like the Dirty South rap, like,
yeah,
I mean, I can't go into lyrics necessarily, but like, I remember some of the songs, they were like popping. There was class, and we'd go on nights out, and like the Hilltop Bar or Reds or whatever, they're just like
yeah,
these tunes would be, and we're like, man, this would not happen, and the bumping, the grinding and stuff, and it just wouldn't happen in the United Kingdom, and it kind of
yeah,
transitioned over. But and then, as you say, like some of us lads had a lot of the electronic music, and culturally you sponge that too. And I remember you used to come by, particularly in the last year or two, as I had a big life change and stuff.
yeah,
You were always around Chinny's apartment,
yeah.
and some of the Irish and English lads as well. So
Mm-hmm.
you what I loved about you, and I know many others did as well, but you didn't stay in your comfortability, as you mentioned earlier. You challenge
Yeah.
yourself to not be tribalistic, and I feel like we could all do a bit better. I don't know what you think, but
Yeah, I do think so. I think sometimes it could be only one side of the aisle who forces themselves to out of their comfort zone. And I think that it could be more of a two-way street. You know, there's like, for example, for me, I don't think any of my white friends came to like the Black Club on a hip hop night, like where you got, you know, the like to a nightclub where all you see is like where they are the minority. You know, I don't know if that's ever happened. But you know, but the way society is, African Americans, we are always in a situation where we are, I wouldn't say always because I want to stay away from general statements, but where it is likely where I won't see somebody that look like me. Like at work, at my place of work now, I'm one of 4, and I'm one of 4 African Americans, one of 6 just not non-white. So even at university, at Wingate, you know, we're still the minority, and in law, it's just the higher you go up, the less, you know, the less diversity it gets.
right. So it's just more predominantly white as you climb the ladder.
Yeah.
It's like that in soccer at the top level, particularly. It's been an issue last 10 years or so. There's been a big chat about that in the football professional realm, about managers, like head coaches, as you guys call them more. You know, you can count on one hand at the top level, like top BAME managers, and you're like, why is that? You know, is it just because they're good enough, or is there something? Is there a barrier? Is there something that's stopping them get from here to here that is man-made? Is just a natural consequence? Like, what is it? So yeah, I don't know.
I think it's it can go back. One can make the argument that it's a tribal thing. You know, one can say, look, I mean, I'm white. I want to work with other people that look like me, so that's who I hire. And you know, so and you know, I can understand that. I think, you know, that if I was in a hiring position, if I was the person who was doing the hiring, and I hire a Black person, you know, nobody will probably say anything. Nobody will be like, oh, he's only hiring Black people. Like, you never hear that story, right? But you don't hear that story because there's rarely any minorities in hiring positions, in positions of power. And you know, I believe that right there, that result is a consequence of slavery. If you think of all the industries, you think you have the automobile industry, you have medicine, farming, any type of major industry, banking, textile, all those industries, a lot of them were started in a time where the people who had the money had already made a lot of money.
If you want to swear, I'm not going to get the police on you. It's fine.
A lot. I don't know if you got the boot button over there.
At the end of the day, bro, yeah, I'm about, you know, being a man of God, but I've said to people, you be raw, you don't have to like.
Yeah. You know, they have they already have made a bunch of money off of certain people. So they can the person with the money, especially in the capitalism society, they control the industry. Ford was the first automobile, 1900s, right?
Yeah.
So any freed slave only became free with nothing. Not like they got a check in the mail that made them whole. They only became free 50 years ago. So they can't start a company. They can't necessarily be in a position to run an industry or propel an industry. So that has what's led us to this point. Why you see that, you know, most of the football managers are white. Most of the club owners are probably white. Even in the U.S., most of all but one NFL owner, I believe, is white. And in the NBA, I think there's 3 minority owners. I'm not sure about the other sports, but you that type of representation is across the board, from the Targets, from your Fortune 500 companies, from all the major industries in the United States, and I would say possibly across the globe, and that's why you see the protests get to that point where I think this might be the first time I've seen protests over a police killing of a minority reach different countries. I mean, as many.
Sorry, I want to ask you. So, do you feel like it was like a tipping point? Do you feel like it was like? Don't get me wrong. What happened to George Floyd was murder, and it was completely wrong. And
right.
But do you feel like that was just like the tipping point, or do you feel like the COVID lockdown and being constrained didn't help the release of the behaviors? Because you saw people like, don't get me wrong, people of all race stealing like crepes and clothes and all sorts of stuff. So I don't know, what do you feel like this incident has done? Because obviously it's done some good things, but then I don't know. I want you to speak, not me.
Yeah. I mean, so I would say, all right, you know, everybody loves Martin Luther King, right? You know, he's become this ultimate figure across the globe for as far as speaking out against oppression. But when Martin Luther King was alive and really speaking out and voicing his concerns, he was one of the most hated people in the United States. He was not liked at all. I mean, people say, you know, now people say that he really exemplified character by his peaceful protest and how he went about things. But his peaceful protest got him arrested. Like, if they were so peaceful, he got him arrested. So peaceful, he was called an extremist. They were so peaceful that President Kennedy approved the FBI to wiretap and surveillance.
I saw that. I've researched into that and found that out. I was like, man,
You know,
so
so
paranoid.
so if a person is so peaceful, like, but he's also seen as a threat to the United States, that's like, I feel like we're on two different ends of the spectrum. You know, and I think that piece gets forgotten about Martin Luther King, that when he was doing the work, he was looked at as an extremist. He wasn't liked at all and was ultimately seen as a major threat to the United States. So I say that too. But after he died, when he died, now he's a hero. Now he's someone to be admired. And it's weird because, you know, George Floyd, we can use him. To some, when he was alive, he could be seen as a threat. I mean, you know, he was seen as a threat. He maybe have seen as somebody who wasn't liked by some people. I mean, he was in handcuffs, so, you know, he definitely wasn't liked at that time, you know, in his last moments.
Yeah,
But
it didn't help. He sadly had quite a criminal record. I think it was like 5 times in prison, sadly. But
of course,
and I want to state this to people, that it doesn't make it right. Like,
of course,
what the frick happened was just like disgusting. I mean,
we have in the lawyer world, we have rules of evidence, and in certain instances, rules of evidence, they bar evidence of a person's prior criminal history because it just isn't relevant to what happened. And, you know, and also, just because a person committed a crime once doesn't
mean he'll do it again.
add any probability that he will do it again. You know, each situation, especially in criminal law, is unique. You have to take the facts as they are. So, you know, even despite his history, you know, I think that 10-minute clip really and for it to be able to be shared on beyond boundaries, beyond country boundaries, is what really resonated with people. But it resonated with people being oppressed all over the world. I mean, you know, I don't know anywhere where, you know, the darker you are, the better you're treated.
Ooh.
I can say that even in my community, you can look at music videos. Everybody loves the light skin.
Like, even when you go to the Middle East, and, you know, they're not black, but they've got more dark olive skin and, you know, slightly near close to the coloration of your skin.
Yeah.
But anyone who's black specifically, like, they look at them like as filth and as slaves still. But yeah, in my head, I'm going across the globe, and you go to the Far East in Asia, and there, you know, you can find tons of evidence of just racist comments. And I even saw like a TV advert in China not long ago this year, like a laundrette clip, and it was like referring to black man like needing washing. It was just like, what? So yeah, as you say, you can't refute that statement almost, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't say, I'll get back to Wingate. You know, I didn't necessarily experience racism at Wingate. per se in North Carolina, I don't really remember anything that would constitute as racism. I think, for one, I do think racist and racism is a word that gets misused a lot and overused. I think it's a clear racism could be a mindset, but there's many times where people may act in a way that is racist. But I would say, the closest thing to racism, was just people not people having their thought process in a box. Like I didn't wear, during our time in North Carolina, there was definitely a dress code that was per se African American. And in clubs and bars, they would push these dress codes. No baggy jeans, no big shirts, no sneakers or boots,
hats.
No hats.
No hats in the club.
Right. So but
if you're 50 Cent, you can wear your hat.
Right. But is this code? Because who are wearing big shirts or baggy? Who are more susceptible to wearing baggy clothes?
African Americans, isn't it? You got to be honest.
Yeah, that was it, right? And I only bring that up because that just wasn't our style where I lived and where I grew up. Our clothes were fitted, we would wear Armani Exchange.
Wearing that slim fit, bro.
Yeah, exactly. And our jeans they weren't necessarily baggy. Our baggy clothes phase was when I was middle school, I would say, and then high school our clothes started to shrink. But and then I get to the South and people would tell me I dress white.
Dang.
That
wasn't me, bro.
they would tell Jamie Vaughn he may dress white. He wore a lot of polo.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he likes his polo. Yeah.
So that could be people being in a box, but when it's enforced by corporations or business owners who own establishments that are held out to the public. And look, you as a business owner, as an establishment, you have a right to say how you want somebody to dress to come into your establishment. That is your right. There's that's what you can do. So it's not really much you can say, but the indirect effect of it is that you know that you are keeping out a certain group of people.
Yeah. I mean, it happens in the UK. I was in Leeds, and me and my mate went to walk in, and the guy went, "Oh, wait a sec," and he looked me up and down and went, "No, you're not gay. You're not coming in." I was like, "Oh, it's a gay bar." I said, "Mate, I don't mind it's a gay bar. We're just going to have a drink with my mate." "Nope, you're not gay." And I was like, wow.
Was that a first time?
Yeah, like the first time I've ever been stopped from going in a bar or cocktail bar or club not because of my age or because I look too young or I might have the wrong clothes. Like, it's usually shoes. Shoes in the United Kingdom are massive. If you're not wearing nice shoes, it's like, nah, mate. Or hats. But yeah, first time I've been stopped from going for any other reason, I was a bit like, oh, so because of my sexuality, I'm not allowed in? Okay. But then again, they're probably trying to protect that community from all sorts of nonsense. So.
Yeah. I mean, my constitutional law teacher would joke about saying, if you go to the club and they say, oh, it's ladies' night, and the club better have a really good reason why they're discriminating based on based on gender, because that's usually against the Constitution. Nobody ever does that, but it's just like a little lawyer banter. But yeah, the first time I kind of experienced racism was I went to law school in Florida.
So was this post 2012,
Yeah,
2013.
this was I took a year off after Wingate, and then I moved to Florida for law school. And I lived in downtown Orlando. And Orlando is everybody thinks Orlando is like a home of Disney World, nice place. Only good thoughts come to you when you think of Orlando.
Florida's a weird place, bro. And I don't mean it disrespectfully to Floridians. My nan lived there for 20, 30 years. But it's like this, I heard Jordan Peterson talk about, it's like this utopia, and where people pretend to hide from things, go there. And it's like a really backward, it's still in the old days. Like Joe Rogan joked about this as well. He said, if you want to lose money and try and setting up a business, go open a bookstore in Miami. I was like, oh, dang. Because it's like, it's still, for the reason you're describing, the only time my whole life, up until my late 20s or whatever, I experienced racism was in the state of Florida. So,
yeah, it was, and it happened. I stayed in a pretty nice building, downtown. I have a concierge. I have really, really, really high floor to ceiling windows. And on the weekends, we would have a cop in the bottom of our building just to monitor, because we were so close to all the happening downtown.
Okay.
He just, I guess that's what the building felt like they wanted to do. So during a night, it was leading up to Halloween. It definitely wasn't the night of Halloween, but it was maybe the weekend before Halloween. It's on a weekday, so the costume parties are going on. I don't have a costume on. There are people in front of me who have a costume on, and to get to the elevator, you have to have a key card that hits the pad and opens the door so you can get to the elevator. Well, that door was already open because there were people with costumes walking in already. And he asked me if I lived there, but didn't ask the people in front of me who had costumes on if they lived there.
It's a bit odd, considering you can't see who the heck they are.
And one could say, oh, like he's just asking, like, he's just asking a question. But in reality he's not used to seeing people like me live in that building.
Mm.
Florida is very have and have nots type of place. And most of the people who have not are minorities, whether they're Hispanic or African American. And Orlando kind of makes you notice this by default. It's because the I-4 highway splits the city in half. Literally, on downtown is on the left side. If you're going west towards Tampa, and on the east side, have nots. On the other side, have nots. And you can tell you got big high rises on one side, rundown houses on the other. And all you got to do is cross under the bridge.
It's like a border, isn't it?
Yeah, it's weird. I don't understand, why things are the way they are sometimes. But you just have to do the best you can to change it. And but yeah, I know we're kind of rambling right now.
No, it's not. It's good because it's your experience. And I heard a similar experience by a African-American woman talk about, she was on this elevator, in a big story, is a corporate building. And she had a guy in the next floor, a white bloke, come on the elevator. She said, "Good morning, how are you?" And he said, "Good morning," smile back. Went down a few floors. This elderly type couple were visiting another floor for whatever purposes for a business. Got on the elevator and she said good morning to them. They didn't say anything back to her.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, okay. The elevator got to the ground floor. The So she's next to the white bloke who said good morning to her, and then the elderly white couple. She went to get off first. Oh no, sorry. The elderly white couple, the gentleman said, ladies first, and let his wife off first. And then she then obliged, the African-American lady obliged, thinking, oh, what a nice gentleman. He's obviously implied I can go first. And she went to go, and he put his hand out and went, no, not you. And then she was just, she would be fiery in her nature to be like, what the heck are you doing? What are you on about? Not me. I'm a lady. But she was in such shock that she froze. And then while she froze, they walked off. And then the other white guy who actually said good morning to her, she looked at him and he just walked off.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a picture of these, let's not say it's like, racism is racism, but it's not like, you know, African slave trade type of racism and cruelty, but it's these small pocket instances and slurs and indirect treatments of superiority, because that's what people forget. Racism is saying that your ethnicity is superior to and they're inferior. It's not
exactly,
you know, a lot of, as you said, it gets way overused. And I don't like to say this to offend you, but like people use the black card on people in work for different situations, and I'm like, well, that's just as divisive. Let's not do that. Like, I look at you equally, but there's these small pockets, like I've just described, like you described, and it's important that we understand that these happen still, and they need to be completely kicked to the curb. And that's back to what I said earlier. Do you think this George Floyd thing was like the last, like a bowl filling up of these individual isolated instances, and people going like the Me Too movement? Or it's like, yeah, I've had, and it's just too much, and it's just gone bang. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was one episode of it boiling over. But to be honest, I mean, I don't think this isn't the last Black person who's going to be killed by police. You know, this isn't the last instance of racism in America or racism around the globe that will, you know, be hopefully a catalyst to bring change. Kind of ties into you know, racism after, you know, you have the we go back to 1865. Actually, let's go back to 1776.
Oh, that's not, mate. Don't do that.
Declaration of Independence.
You had to, didn't you?
United States.
Those red coats are gone.
we do what we need to do, and we rough up the red coats.
Good on you.
All right. So 1776, which also had African American soldiers fighting in this war, and they were told that you're going to be free if you fight in this war, right? So, and I'll tie that in as I go along. Yeah. But 1776, the document says, all men are created equally, with inalienable rights given to them by God. It doesn't say, I don't think it says God, it says by their creator. And consent to the government for some of those rights to be taken. All right. But that key phrase, all men are created equal, in 1776. Slavery didn't end until 1865.
Can I just slip this in there? You know, the Brits have had some awful things, but William Wilberforce, my guy, Christian man and God from Hull, Yorkshire, England, he's the guy, he's the Don that stopped it all, bro. Yeah.
I mean, the country is founded on a hypocrisy, on a false promise. You know, one can say, oh, well, they didn't intend to include slaves when they wrote that, because slaves weren't seen as people, they were seen as property. Okay, great, that's fine. But once they're abolished, once slavery is abolished, now and now you have the amendments added to the Constitution after the Civil War. Now they are supposed to be seen as men, as people, and therefore are entitled to what the Declaration of Independence promises: all men are created equal. And that is what this entire thing is under, that umbrella. All men are created equal. And those amendments. Now, we all, in America, we have the Second Amendment to bear arms. You know, one could say, do Black people really have that right to bear arms? Could we go like the protesters in Michigan who were protesting the country being shut down due to a public health crisis? Could we do the same thing?
Stand there with literally like semi-automatic guns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't even know if a Black person will feel comfortable in trying it out. They might as well leave a suicide note behind.
Sorry, so for our viewers, because they're probably like, okay, he's talked about the Constitution, he's talked about amendments and all this stuff, and the founding truths of the principles of what America's founded. I know because I've actually been in Philadelphia
Right.
to the Constitution Center. It's absolutely brilliant, and the United Kingdom need one too. We absolutely do. Right. But when you say like they've gathered at the Capitol, in Michigan, and with the guns, can you just break that down a little bit more for our viewers? So they're like, oh, what's going on there? And then when he said, if I was a Black, you are a Black man, but if retrospective, if a Black man goes, oh, I'm going to try that out, he's like writing a suicide note. What do you mean by that? So just so people can be like.
So what I mean by that is that if all men are created equal, we all have the same rights that are awarded to us, the same rights and protections that are awarded to us by the Constitution. That is the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, the right to bear arms. The Fourth Amendment protects us from unwarranted searches and seizures. Fifth Amendment is, we're able to, it gives us due process. Sixth Amendment is right to a jury trial, right to a lawyer. If we don't have one, the court gives us a lawyer. A bunch of others.
That's good, right?
I could keep going, but so you have that. Now we're all supposed to have those rights. Now they're not, the problem is that the law is sometimes fictional from reality, and that in application it is not seen that African Americans, those rights are applied or respected in the same way that they are for white Americans.
For white Americans. So based on the people with the, semi-automatic like guns stood on the Capitol protesting the lockdown, and as you said, if it was reversed and like there was African Americans standing there, what would you perceive to happen, or what?
We can say hypothetically. Hypotheticals.
Okay, why would there be a hesitation in your mind to go do that?
There will be a hesitation because a Black person with a gun screams what?
For me, I'm just going to be honest with you, because you answered the question to a white guy, so not beating around the bush. Violence. Unpredictability. Is he a thug or is he not? Why has he got that gun? I sound racist doing that, but I go into my mind in the dark places, and the prejudices that I know humans are capable to do that. Is that enough for you? But that's you paint, and it's wrong.
No, exactly. And that's why that hesitation is there. Because I want to live first and foremost. So if the mere reason that the mere presence of me having a gun puts me in that light. My chances of living go down.
Can I ask you this as well, bro? Because this is what
Yeah.
do you remember what you said to me when we were inboxing a week or two ago? You said something that really freaking like stung me, like it got me. It talked about being me and you being together somewhere. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
can you share that because you said it in a sentence, and what that one sentence did helped me understand more of the subtlety of the racism that still exists, that me as a white guy won't see or encounter because I just won't. So yeah, can you share that with our viewers? Because I know
Yeah.
that this is really, I want to say to our viewers right now, I really hope and pray you've got this far with us. I really hope and pray that you're just leaning in and tuning into this and what's trying to be communicated for Chase's experience, because this is what he's about to say and tell us is the defining thing of what the why behind the what right now in the world, the why behind George Floyd and his murder and the mass hysteria and the reaction and the protesting. It's this statement. So go for it, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember, I can't quote it, but I would say if me and you are walking down the street, and whether it be an alley, an open street, whatever, and the police were nearby, they would think that I'm more susceptible to crime than you are.
Like you're more of a, I think you used the word, if it was a dark alley and we all walk together and officer
I'm more of a
walking,
threat.
you're more of a threat.
Yeah, I'm more of a threat.
Can you break that down like more? So
Well,
how do you?
Yeah, that goes back to the slavery times. Police isn't like we think of police as like, oh, that is like a staple in a civilized society, right? But police started as slave catchers for runaway slaves. That's where the origins were. And for a police to think I'm a threat, that ideology has been pushed through propaganda, through all types of sources from that time up until it continues. And it's hard for white people to get that out of their mind, because we aren't born with that ideology. It's taught to us. But we talk about in the Black community, we talk about breaking the generational curse, being good fathers, being in our child's lives, just whatever curse that our particular family suffers from, breaking it. Well, white people haven't faced that, trying to break it. I mean, it takes an experience to try to change your mind that that person, I'm not typically more likely to be robbed by this Black person than I am more likely to be robbed by this white person.
Oh, yeah.
That ideology, I don't think, that's why we can make laws that make it better, or that try to make it, or have the intent to make it better. But if that ideology doesn't change, then the police is still gonna say, I felt threatened, I was scared, and I just acted. And in the United States, police are almost to the point where they have immunity. So to see, me personally, knowing what I know, I'm not surprised when cops get off.
I've seen it with brutality to all races as well. Kelly Thomas in 2011. Oh my gosh, he had some mental health issues. A homeless white guy, and they battered him senseless, and he died later that week as a result. And like,
yeah,
the police got acquitted completely. It was like, what? $4 million payout to Kelly Thomas's family, and then the police were just let off. So yeah, I'm not trying to sideswipe and say, oh, all lives matter and all that. We're focusing on
definitely
on the Black Lives Matter. But as you say, police almost have this. Yeah, you said it right.
they almost have immunity, and that is the systematic. When we talk about systematic racism, that is, and I go back to where, you know, you had the KKK. They were like the logo of racism, right? Like, and then once the KKK went away, or they stopped wearing hoods and they stopped wearing their clothing in public. What I try to tell people is that, well, the KKK doesn't pay. Like, that's not like a job, not an employer, right? So they're a fraternity in a sense.
Definitely.
So what are their jobs? They have to work somewhere in society. And sometimes they're put in positions that are systematically able to oppress people. So if let's say I don't know, let's say one fraternity A was the most popular fraternity in the UK, and they made, and the members of fraternity A were the prime minister. They held top positions in parliament. They owned businesses, and they just didn't like fraternity B because the girls like fraternity B. Well, then that means that they can use their employment, their power, to make sure that fraternity A is always put into this good light, so that, you know.
I'm a feeling, yeah. So
you understand?
Because like, oh man, I feel like we could do this for hours. This is class. I want to ask you like, just a couple of things before we close, and it's my last question is what I question most of my guests, which is an enlighten the shadows moment, because it is mental health related. So I want to ask you this before I do ask you that last question. What do you think are some solutions or sort of dialogue that we can engage in now, so that, because I'll be honest with you, I want to be honest with you, I have empathized right now with the Black community worldwide, but and this is a side note, and people say, oh, it doesn't matter, but actually it does a little bit. Myself and other white people who I know, I asked you the question, but I know I'm not racist, and the strong majority of white British people are just not racist at all. Like, they're really not. They're almost having to defend themselves and feel guilty for the past, as we've gone in and talked about the history. And if they don't, or they're not saying one thing or anything, it's like, you're the problem, and et cetera, et cetera. And I get that perspective. But my heart is about protecting people's mental health and creating mindfulness and thinking in the now, especially for men. So, there is a white working class male decline in the last 10 years in Britain. Like, the white working class boy is statistically proven is not doing well at all. And so it swings and roundabouts. The point I'm making is, what can we do today? What for people's mental health? What stuff you've done for your mental health? Like you mentioned the incident in Orlando. Like, what can we do as white and Black, let's say men? The women are just good at their feelings. They're good at not suppressing things. What can you suggest for our viewers in times right now when it's all kicking off? And, you know, what can you think is a solution?
I think for Americans per se, the country has to hold up and take accountability for their founding principle of all men are created equal. All right, that will solve a lot. Next, I would say that the funding of education has to be a priority, because if the lack of education, it usually projects where a person will end up in the classes of society.
Would you also say the quality and the depth of
And
education? Because
yeah,
the
the
history
quality.
is,
Yeah. You know, and I think schools can do a better job of teaching a broader perspective of history. You know, usually the bad thing about history is that the person who wrote the history is usually the winner. So, you know, the other part doesn't usually get told or gets put in whatever the winner's perspective was.
but what
Uh,
about for an individual, brother? Because I agree, you come out some corkers, like it's all quite institutionalized approaches. But like, say, like you've got like 2 or 3 blokes right in front of us now watching, and they're like, right, one's white, one's black, one's Asian. What would you say are individual changes or decisions they can make to improve their mental health and also improve just their approach to what's going on? Does that make sense?
yeah, I would tell them, you know, reflection is key. You know, not perfect. We all have our biases. And a lot of those biases are unconscious. I would say to reflect on yourself, reflect on where you may have been prejudiced in certain instances. Don't account them to being isolated instances, but there's a reason why your mind is shaped that way, and then seek the truth. Don't seek to, I would say, don't seek that the exception is the truth. Seek that you can say, oh, I only thought that prejudice because of this. And it's only because of that. And if you were able to form that thought, then you need to figure out why you formed that thought.
Yeah, that's deep. That's good.
You know, you have that, and then you start to unravel yourself. Because, you know, we are, in a sense, we believe what we told, or we believe a lot of what we're told. We just don't have the time or probably the effort to research everything that we're told to see if it's true or valid or what. And we just believe it. If it makes us, if it hits our emotions, we run with it.
This is so good. Because I see this as a problem right now in the 21st century with the click instantaneous generation.
And everybody's so emotional right now, which they're so. You know, I would say, you know, like the most sane person would believe that rioting is bad, or no, that stealing is bad, right? The most sane person could all agree that stealing is bad. I would say, though, that the people who riot, the people who loot, they have nothing to lose. Why? Because they feel like society has dealt them a bad hand.
They've been robbed almost, you know.
They've been robbed of their possible an opportunity to better themselves. They've been put in a 12-foot ditch and given a 10-foot rope and say, yeah, you got to figure out the last 2 feet. And I'll say that too, because I see a lot of people say, you know, the looting and the rioting is not the way. It's not it's flushing out it's devaluing or devaluing the cause and the message. Well, some of the people who are rioting and looting, they don't necessarily have the platform to intellectually tell you what's wrong and for you to listen.
It's like when a child is about 6 or 7 and in primary school and they kick off and you go, oh, you can dismiss it as I said earlier, like bad behavior. Or you can ask the question why. And it's like that unpeeling, as you say, like an onion. You know, it always starts with a why. I've worked with catchment in Nottingham where it's really quite tough and have a lot of social emotional input for 2 years in a primary school. And you see these children, like there's some deeper stuff there and a lot of children, they can't say it. We expect them to just say it verbally, but they play it out or they act it out. And so in the same way, I guess what you're saying is even adults, you know, not that it excuses the behavior, but it's like you can understand as to why it's happening, if that makes sense. I think that's what you're saying.
It's like if I can say, you know, my knee hurts, right? I can say my knee hurts. And you're like, oh, it looks fine on the outside, it looks fine. And it's like, no, my knee hurts. And you're like, and then you touch it. And I don't move, but I say my knee hurts. And then the x-ray may show that, oh, something's really wrong. So when people say that, you know, the rioting is bad, but really, and Martin Luther King had a quote, I'm sure you've seen it or people have seen it, that rioting is the voice of the unheard. You know, it's because their initial voicing didn't work. So now I'm going to make you feel the pain that I felt. It's like if somebody punches you in the face, am I wrong for punching them back? Or should I say, hey, you shouldn't have did that, apologize? No, if that person punches me in the face, then he should expect to get punched back. So when a society comes in, and we call it gentrification, eminent domain, or back in history, you know, there were communities of minorities that were flourishing. You know, Rosewood, Greenwood, Wilmington, North Carolina was a huge African-American establishment.
That's where Michael Jordan was growing up, wasn't it?
It was burnt to the ground. It was burnt to the ground. Now, and we also see the biases in the coverage. So if we see rioting, and humans are a learned behavior, right? We learn a lot from each other from watching. So if our generations before us saw that white people came in and burnt down our city, well, the people who are rioting and looting, they don't feel like that is their city. So they can burn it down because it's not theirs anyway. They don't feel like it's theirs. They don't feel like they're a part of that community. They don't get the same funding that the rest of the community gets. So they're going to burn it just like their community was burnt. Or they're going to take away the resources just like their community was strapped to their resources. Racism became sudden and systematic when they had to denounce the KKK. And they, I'll use the example of one of my classmates in law school. He's from Florida, and he told me one day at the end of class that I look like a robber. All right.
Okay.
So we're in law school, He said I look like a robber. I have a sleeve tattoo, you know, but I'm still in law school with this person, and he said I look like a robber. So he's going to go on to be maybe a prosecutor. He could be a judge. He could be an attorney for a major corporation. Either way, he's in a position to serve the public. But let's say he's a judge or a prosecutor, and he thinks his classmate looks like a robber. Well, that person that they lack evidence on, who looks like me, but they don't have much evidence, they don't have much of a case. If he's a judge and he thought his classmate looked like a robber, that guy who is a suspect stands no chance. And that's what happens.
So those prejudices again, going back to it, and not having that knowledge, not having the education, the history of what you said, and it creates those behaviors, those thoughts, and I'm loving what you're saying. This is good. I feel like it's going to help more people, hopefully, who've got this far and watching it, just kind of like absorbing this information to realize. I've got a principle of Enlighten the Shadows. Basically, it's ACT. And that stands for ACT, which is acknowledge. And I feel like at the very least right now that people are acknowledging that something's not right, something to do with racism, and that's the start of the process. But the C stands for comprehend, which is that they grasp it. It's not actually the Latin root of comprehend is to not actually fully have all knowledge, but it's to grasp it. And then the T is taking action. And, you know, people are taking action in a variety of forms, which has its pros and cons, as you're saying. I feel like you're helping our viewers understand the systems, understanding the mindsets. But yeah, man, I appreciate it a lot.
I mean, it's definitely, you know, they tell us when you're in debate, right? Because we have to see things from, let's say, from our side, what we're going to argue, what the other person's going to argue, and what the ultimate person who has the decision is going to decide. So the easiest way for me to be able to see what the other side is going to say or think or how they interpret it is for me to jump to their side, put myself on their side, and see how I will argue against myself.
It's almost like empathy, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what I think we all could benefit from. But I would be lying if I didn't say that I think white people could benefit the most from is that jumping to the minority side and seeing what life is like.
At least trying, you know. And
at least trying.
To our viewers
and you know, people use the term white privilege, or people say that's a political term or whatever. It may be. I think we all have privileges in a sense. Me and you, we had an athletic privilege. Like, we got certain things that regular students didn't get, and that's just how it is. So we all have privileges, but when it becomes systematic into society, and the state backs it, the state backs a privilege for a group of people. It's important for white people to recognize it, recognize where it's not. Life isn't fair, so nobody's asking for fairness per se, but the access to be able to make my life better. Don't put a roadblock in it, because a Black person making their life better does not hinder a white person from making their life better.
Oh, that's so good. That's fine.
But I don't know if that is the mindset of white people. And I think that may go, that goes to immigration outside of like the of why immigration should be regulated to some extent. as far as like resources. You don't want to exhaust all your resources and just let people in, and you know, there has to be some type of procedure. But the rhetoric that is pushed is that if we let immigrants in, they're going to take your jobs.
Some of the jobs that a lot of lazy white people aren't willing to do.
They won't even take.
So, yeah.
You know, so it's like, you know, but that fear, and it's easy to control people with fear.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that, and the fear has been pushed since the end of slavery, that the fear was, if we let these slaves free, they're going to come attack us and repay us for what we did to them. So can't let them free. So now once they're free, we can't give them land and an opportunity for money. We have to make that difficult, because if they do get that, then this country will no longer be ours.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's simple war logic. You know, and it sucks. It sucks that we're supposed to be in the same country. We're one country, but war, like that type of logic is being pushed, that it's not enough out here. It's not enough in this United States for everybody to have the same opportunity, because that lessens white people's chance of guaranteeing their opportunity.
Guaranteeing it, yeah, that's the key. Yeah.
You know.
Thank you, bro.
But yeah, really man.
Enlighten those shadows. You know, we went deep, we went dark, we went into like places where I don't think people fully acknowledge, and it's not, some of them, it's not necessarily their fault. I just think it's being exposed, and I think my channel is one to do that, particularly for men, for enlightening their lives and making a comfortable platform. But I just felt some synergy between you and I to do this today, and I'm really grateful that we have. I'm so thankful that you know, even hearing you, I've learned some more stuff today, and that's just going to benefit my life and the way that I approach my thought processes, the way I'm going to, you know, expand my future and have conversations too. And it'll be interesting to see the reactions of people, because I know I believe the length of this video has gone way past an hour or whatever, but I'm glad it has, because it's not allowed to rob you of the exposure to communicate the deep underlying issues with what we see pockets of racism today. And so, yeah, man, I appreciate it a lot. So I want to ask you just lastly, what is your best piece of advice for a man right now who just feels utterly helpless with the things of life, whether that's the terrain of stuff online, whether it's the news, whether it's coming out of lockdown, whether it's finances? What can you give one piece of advice for someone who feels utterly hopeless right now that might rescue them?
Yeah, I would say everybody's path is different, but to get to where you want to go, it's going to take persistence. You're going to have to, if the door won't open on the first time, you got to keep trying to knock it down to the millionth time. And you know, you have to believe and know that this is what you're supposed to do, that you have worth, that your life has worth, that people do love you whether you think they do or don't, and that you're living for something that's bigger than yourself.
Come on, that's great, man.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Thank you so much, and what an amazing chat it's been today. And all the viewers, I really hope that you got to the end of this. I really hope that you plugged in and listened to Chase's views and perspectives, because that's what I'm all about. We're all unique, we're all different, we have individual life experiences, but it's so important that we listen to one another. I feel like the art of listening is declining almost at its monthly rate in the last couple of years or so. I think it's so important that like on this platform that I have. I'm such a chatter, and I love to just dialogue, but it's almost, I like this to be a monologue, and I hope that I provide that for you today, guys. Yeah, I just want to put on the screen right now the emphasis I do each week, which is this cannot do anything or help as many blokes as I want it to, or even I feel like this program is quite unique. It could help children, young people and women, but can you please just get on your Facebook, share this video as it's coming up right now, like it also with a thumbs up. You can also subscribe. So on the red button, you'll see coming the red arrow right now. Just press that button, and I know it only takes a minute or so to set up the YouTube account. I've had people that I know who don't really use YouTube much have done that for me, so please can you do that. We've got Enlighten the Shadows on Twitter and Instagram at the same handle name. It's Enlighten the One. So as I said last week, it sounds like a swear word's always popping up in there, but it's come up on your screen right now. So thank you guys so much, and thank you for an amazing time. Chase, thank you, brother.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you for having me. Best of luck.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Cheers.